Okay. And that's all set, and that's all set. I think that's everything. And let me pop out the chat. Change it back to live chat. Okay. Extend this down. All right. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. I know it might be afternoon or evening where you're at. Am I in focus? I feel like I'm only barely in focus. That's better, I think. All right. Let's see here. Afternoon from Normandy. Greetings from Denmark. Morning from Quebec. I've seen the scale for Shatterpoint. It's about 38, so roughly the same as Crisis Protocol, says that blasted Samouflage. Seems terrain comes in the box. This is where 3D printing helps. Just upscale your STLs. I haven't seen a thing yet about scale, and I think that's a little telling. We'll get into it a little bit more, but in the press release and all that stuff, there's nothing that says, oh, this 28 millimeter scale, this 32 millimeter scale. And I'm betting it's 40. I'm betting it's the same as Marvel Puppy Conclave, Lunchtime Rainbow, whatever it's called. Morning from Townsville. Hi from a sunny and unnaturally warm West Midlands. There you go. I like Legion a lot, says JPC. No desire for a second Star Wars game. That is also an issue, I think, yes. Hello from Western Massachusetts, formerly Providence, Rhode Island. There you go. Upstate South Carolina, northern Sweden, Missouri, Germany. Let's see here. Morning from Tennessee. Atomic Mass states the terrain in Shadowpoint and Legions are cross-compatible, so the scale shouldn't be too divergent. I haven't seen that anywhere, and just from looking at the models, I don't know. I'm dubious. But again, if they would just say this is the size they are, but if anyone's got any links or whatever, or says, hey, here's some pictures or some more blog posts, but I was looking and I haven't seen jack, which is a bummer. Yeah. Bases are what made me think it's 38 to 40. Yeah, I agree, Joshua. They do look a lot alike the ones from the Marvel game. Yeah. Jesse, how you doing? Morning from Montreal. Hello from Belgium. Hungover hello from Portland, Maine. Hopefully getting my new Space Station Zero crew during this. Getting to my new Space Station Zero crew during the stream. We'll see. Well, best of luck to you, Kyle. I hope it works out. Good day from London. Looking forward to getting a hold of Xenos Rampant. Probably too many minis for you, but it'll scratch my mini agnostic large skirmish battle itch. Yeah, it looks interesting, but you're right. It is too many models for me. But I'm glad that they're heading in that direction as far as making a, because they just only had Lion Rampant, which was historical. They had Dragon Rampant, which was fantasy, and now they've got Xenos Rampant. So that's pretty cool. Checking in from South Ontario. Bummed because I missed the Sword and Brush show held in my own city yesterday. Didn't find about it till it's too late. That's always the way it works. There's always, I was talking, I don't know, pre-pandemic, let's say 2017 or so, I was chatting with Hank, who's one of the main guys that runs Adepticon. And at this point, Adepticon had been around for, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years or whatever. And he was telling me that he was in a game store in Chicago talking to 40K players, and they had never heard of Adepticon before. And he's like, it is literally 20 minutes west to here, and it's the biggest miniature convention in the country. And they're like, oh yeah, I never heard of it. It's just, you can always think you're marketing to enough people, and you never, ever, ever are. You never get everybody. Hello from Torrid, Paraguay. Well, that's fun. I think. Is that fun? I have no idea. Let's see here. Good morning from Jonesboro, Illinois. Hello from the middle of the Madison Half Marathon. Nice. This is what I wanted from Legion, so I'm pretty pumped. I just prefer small model count, and MCP is a really solid game right now, and excited to see what comes from it. I just really wanted skirmish rules for Legion models, but it looks like they're like, oh yeah, no, this is a different game and you'll have to buy all new models and all new terrain and all that stuff. And yeah, I don't know. There's one AMG video where they had the terrain in the background and it looks big. Sure. I think Shatterpoint is just a bit too close to Legion conceptually that I'm worried that they'll compete with each other. I mean, to be fair, Asmodee / Fantasy Flight / AMG has never seemed to have a problem with that. They're like, hey, you know what's really popular? Star Wars X-Wing. You know what we should do? Make a game almost identical to it, but with slightly different scale, with different ships. We'll call it Armada and see how that works. And sometimes release things at the exact same time. Now, admittedly, some of the release dates that they did with that game, those two games, were unfortunately due to shipping strikes in the port of Los Angeles and stuff. There was stuff that was supposed to be released months previously that sat on a boat for a long time, and then it was finally all released. And then they were like, well, we got to put it out there. This was, again, years ago. But they've never struck me as a company that really cares whether they seem to cannibalize their own market. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but... What we saw really hyped me up for the game as someone who only plays Middle-earth SPG, and I'm interested in seeing more for the system. Nice. When I get back, we'll do housework. No time for hobbies, recovering from vaccinations. Yeah, I got to get my booster. Uncle Adam, you are correct. There is a massive problem in the hobby now. The toy action figures are too cool to pass up, and they are like Pringles. You can't have just one. I mean, you can if you are stronger than me. It's just that. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Let's see here. Skirmish for Legion or Imperial Assault 2.0. Yeah. Honestly, even like there was kind of skirmish in Imperial Assault, but yeah, I like Legion stuff better, I think, you know. I'm currently building a big pile of tabletop fantasy terrain from scratch, mostly out of cardboard. Nice. Shatterpoint makes good display models if they are 2 to 3 times bigger than 28 millimeter. I mean, they're not going to be that big. Like, a 28 millimeter model is maybe about yay big, and a 40 millimeter model is maybe like about that big, but it's not twice. Like, 28 millimeter, twice of 28 is 54. So if you think about the old, if you've ever seen any in the flesh, which most people haven't these days because it's pretty old, but back in the early 2000s, Games Workshop made a game called Inquisitor, and those models were 54 millimeter, and that didn't work. It failed kind of bad, unfortunately, because it was kind of an interesting concept, but nonetheless. Anyway, so my point is that, yeah, 40 is not even twice as big as 28. Caught up on your most recent Twitch VOD. What about getting one of those little culinary smoke gun things to make smoke for your photos? I don't even know what a culinary smoke gun is. That sounds kind of, is it like real smoke? Like, is it, like if it's something where it's like, oh, I have to burn like cedar chips or hickory chips to give it a smoke flavor, I don't know if I want to do that. Because then that is actual burning, and then it's, you know, but whereas like the mist that you use in a smoke machine is not as difficult to mess with or whatever. But yeah, it's something. I'll have to look into it. Unless you can put like liquid smoke into those things, like for flavoring. I've never come across one. Let's see here. Hopefully you'll be able to downsize the skirmish rules and make it a playable game for your existing minis, maybe inches down to centimeters or something. Yeah, potentially. I guess that's true. That's true. Good morning from Colorado. Painting up my Zombicide Undead or Alive pledge that just arrived. Nice. Hi, Uncle Adam. Really enjoyed the Joy Toy vid. Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah. It was just something that, like, I thought, you know, this is related to wargaming, and it's interesting, and it's still, I'm a little bit flummoxed why... It's just one of those things where you look at it and go, wow, this thing is $200. That seems kind of like a lot, but it's, you know, it's all pre-painted and all that stuff. And then you see a completely unbuilt and unpainted Imperial Knight. You're like, but that's 170. Why is this so expensive when it's not even like built or painted, and it can't even pose, and you can't even take the guns off and put them back on again, and it doesn't come with an extra dude inside and all that stuff. Yeah. Asmodee now has easy access to the Dark Horse IPs and Lord of the Rings. Really? So maybe more large miniatures games in the future. Also, the video games they own the IP for. I don't know. I got to be honest. Like, there's a limit. Like, 40 millimeter, I think honestly, partially, 40 millimeter is one of the things that makes me not particularly interested in getting into the Marvel game, to be honest. Like, I own the starter set, and I own like 2 models outside of that. Like, I want to say maybe Hulk and Venom. And I don't know. I think the size is a big part of it. I kind of prefer a little bit smaller, but I don't know. That's a good question, because I'm interested in if Parabellum War Games, if they ever make a true skirmish game, and their stuff is like 38 millimeter, they say. Yeah, I don't know. Generally, I still feel like I prefer 28 to 32 millimeter, I guess, but like 38, I'm willing to give a try as long as they come up with a rule system that is interesting to me. But 40 is like evidently like too much. I don't know. I think partially also for Marvel, the issue is that I don't know that I could properly paint those miniatures and make myself happy with them, because I have a tendency to paint everything real grungy, and they're very comic booky. Like, they're not movie guys. They're more comic book style, I guess. I don't know. I could be wrong. I watched Guerrilla Miniatures review of Osprey's Xenos Rampant. I'd be way more interested in that than any Star Wars game. I mean, again, a lot of people like stuff that's specifically branded, that follows a story that they know. Like, I like stuff that's miniatures agnostic, so that's cool. If Xenos Rampant was a skirmish game, like a actual skirmish game, I'd be a lot more interested. They sent me a copy of it, so I've got it, and I've flipped through it and everything. But as soon as I was going through it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you have like," and it's an army game, not a skirmish game. So I was like, well, but I got to be honest too, and I'm wondering if this is something that's new, but there's not nearly as much artwork in here as there in a lot of other Osprey games. There's a lot of photographs of miniatures. Okay, so I finally opened to a page that has artwork on it, but like there's a lot of photographs of miniatures and things like that. But one of the things about Osprey games has been that there's always been a lot of artwork. Like, I was very impressed by how much artwork was in like, Zona Alpha and stuff like that. And this one has got a lot less. And the cover art is okay, which is also kind of surprising to me, because usually their cover art is, I believe, banging is what the kids say. So I don't know what that's about. It's interesting. I don't know if it's just a shift in how their priorities or whatever, but yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, like I said, I was because it's an army style game. It's probably not for me, but I'm glad that they're putting that stuff out there, because I know there are people out there who prefer that kind of thing. Going off your Joy Toy vid, have you been tempted to print a diorama in a different scale in the original source? No, I've never been super into dioramas. Like, I'm just barely starting to dip my toe into display painting. Hopefully by August, I'm going to have something for that. But yeah. Just bought Venom because he's my favorite bad guy. I haven't put him in together yet. Nice. First Blood 2.0 Conquest Skirmish. Except it's not, though. Like, I played it, well, I mean, I guess if they've changed it since 2021, but I played a demo of it at Gen Con 2021, and it is basically Age of Sigmar scale. So you're still moving around units that have to be in cohesion. You still have some individuals as well, but it's still, you're moving around squads. And you still, in a normal game that you would play in that, you're still going to be pushing around 20 to 30 models. And what I'm looking for is conquest the conquest models, because it's, especially in the last couple of years, their models have gotten way better. So I want that, and I want 5 to 10 guys that don't have to constantly stand near each other, that they can spread out, like lots of other types of games like that. But yeah, so we'll see how that works out. My brother wrote some rules for 12-inch GI Joes in the discount store knockoffs, and he called it the big guys. Nice. Embracer that owns Asmodee bought Dark. Oh, that's right. Embracer bought Asmodee, and they own Dark Horse. Embracer does, and then the Lord of the Rings rights. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Oops. Howdy from upstate New York. Good morning from Maryland. How you doing? Osprey's upcoming Pulp Skirmish game sounds fun. Love that era. There's a game out there called Pulp Alley that you can get on Wargame Vault and stuff like that, which a lot of people seem to like. And I think, honestly, Ash Barker has done at least a couple of bat reps, I think, with Pulp Alley. I could be wrong, but I thought he has. If not, it's somebody else who did pretty good quality, and that's why I'm thinking it is Ash. That's, for me personally, like, that era has never been a big draw, but I'm glad, again, that there are people out there who are not just being like, oh, we're just going to keep making more sci-fi, games, or keep making more fantasy games. I appreciate that, people do that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I don't know if the new Pulp game from Osprey is related to the Pulp Alley game, or if they're two separate but in the same era or whatever. I mean, that's pretty cool either. Work a trade with Sam and get your Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff painted. Yeah, I think he's usually pretty busy. I don't know if that's the... let's see here. I'm annoyed with the Shatterpoint announcement because the starter set is definitely coming with Darth Maul and his Mandalorian Death Guard, which is just released for Legion, and we already have 2 Mauls. Yeah, that's the thing, too, is what it's going to do, and I can guarantee this, is that they're going to put a lot into Shatterpoint. Legion will become on the back burner, and part of that's going to be, in my opinion, because the AMG people wrote Shatterpoint. They didn't technically design and build originally Legion. That came from a different group of folks who used to work at Asmodee, I guess, technically. So even if they don't mean to, people will immediately be like, oh, they're putting Legion on the back burner. Oh, this Shatterpoint's more important to them. Because honestly, every time something comes out for Marvel now, people in the Legion area, from what I've seen, have been like, oh, yeah, no, that, of course that, but we don't get this. And it's just, having so many different communities like that you're going to make them unhappy about when somebody, it's like having a bunch of kids and then you give one of them a present and the other ones are like, well, what am I over here, chopped liver? You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. That's going to be real interesting, but I don't believe that they're going to shut off Legion. I don't believe they're going to be like, well, it was a fun run, but we're done with that now. We're putting everything in the Shatterpoint or whatever. That word, I know that there's a Shatterpoint Star Wars novel that has something to do with Mace Windu, I guess. But that word still to me does not say Star Wars. I don't know why. It just doesn't seem to. It seems like a word that you would hear in a comic book, like a Marvel comic book. Like if you were like, oh, there's the new, there was a Secret Wars and that was pretty cool. But what I really liked was when they did the whole Shatterpoint run. I would have been like, sure, that makes sense. But when you're like Shatterpoint and Star Wars together, for some reason in my brain, I'm like, those words don't seem to go together. But, that's a little tiny thing. Oops, everything scrolled again. Isn't Conquest 40 millimeter or is it 38? Technically, I believe it's 38. Now, at that point, you're splitting not actual hairs, because hairs are usually thinner than a millimeter, but still, you're pretty close to each other. And that's the thing, too. That's the one thing, like, there's a part of me that goes, I can see the benefit to painting Conquest miniatures bigger, because they're, like, fantasy and they're grungy. The concept of painting Marvel miniatures, for me at least, is like, again, because they are designed, the models are designed a little bit more towards the comics and a little bit less away from, say, the MCU movies and stuff. I don't know if I feel like I can paint comic book style or even close to that. I don't know. And again, I know I can paint them however I want. I get that. But there's also something about me looking at that and going, that's not what they look like in the movies. So if I paint them like in the movies, it's going to look weird. You know what I mean? The modeling wise, First Blood is squad versus rank and file, to be honest. Not in a bad way. It's just not quite Kill Team Warband. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, again, First Blood is heading in the right direction. If they make a third game that is... And here's the deal. You'll notice also that First Blood and Conquest use the same models. That's kind of smart. I honestly believe if AMG would have sat down and wrote a good skirmish game that used the Legion models, sure, they probably wouldn't make as much money, but on the other hand, they also wouldn't split the audience again, and they also wouldn't. I don't know. I understand that it's all about money, and that's all they got to do. That's I get that, but it doesn't make me interested. I got to be honest with you, and I want a Star Wars skirmish game, but from just initial first blush, I don't think it's this one. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it turns out to be awesome, and I'm completely blown away, but we'll see. New to the hobby, and your channel has been amazing. Thank you very much. Well, absolutely, Kelston. I'm glad to hear that it's helping. Not sure if I've asked this before, but have you tried Forbidden Psalm to scratch your miniature skirmish RPG itch? Oh yeah, no, I've got Forbidden Psalm. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I've also got the Last War, which is the alternate World War I version of Forbidden Psalm. That book is coming soon, but I have the PDF. And then I just got the PDFs for the new Cyberpunk version of Forbidden Psalm, which is called KSP. I can never remember what the S stands for. I don't know what it is. I've got like some sort of mental block. It's kill something process, but it's not S for something. It's kill server process, kill space process. I can't remember what it stands for. Anyway, like I literally just got the PDFs for that, but the book for that I think is coming maybe beginning of next year, but I could be wrong. It's coming soonish, I think. Excited the kill sample process. That's what it is. Yes. I don't know why the word sample is. I think it's like, because the word sample, when you see it over something, it usually means this is not what you're getting. This is a sample. You know what I mean? Like, it's anyway. Excited that the digital rewards for Forbidden Psalm kill sample process went out. Got Last War from the Kickstarter 2. My game manual pile of shame seems to grow as fast as my plastic. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of having multiple different types of games. If you can get models that work in multiple different types of games, that's even better. Like if you're like, well, this guy, I can play him in this game. That's the upside to sometimes having rule systems that you like that are all science fiction or fantasy or something like that. When you start getting into more niche things like weird World War I or, cyberpunk and stuff like that, it's a little bit harder sometimes to swap those models around between different game systems. But, maybe if you end up starting to collect a whole bunch of different cyberpunk games, then not so much. Maybe you're going to play like Reality's Edge and Kill Sample Process and the other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah. Zambies, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. I know you've had a cold, and so I hope that that's getting better. Pachow from Seattle, and also to you. Let's see here. Oddly, I'm at a reenactors market feeding my other hobby. Well, that's fun. Pulp Alley has a ton of bat reps and tutorial videos themselves. Yeah, maybe that's part of it. I swear I've seen Ash do some, but you're right. They also have a lot of their own battle reports, too. Just played Warhammer Underworlds for the first time and really enjoyed it. I'm starting to realize that I really like most GW games except for 40k and Age of Sigmar. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's very possibly a scale situation and not a physical scale of the miniatures, because they do have a tendency to keep their miniatures mostly the same scale. I mean, the scale of the game. Maybe you're more interested in Warcry and Kill Team and Underworlds and, I don't know, Blood Bowl and Necromunda, but the big army games are not for you. I mean, that's a possibility as well. And Lord knows it's for me, I like the idea of maybe using the skirmish rules from Shatterpoint if it's any good with Legion models. Not a fan of the style and the poses of Shatterpoint. I got to be honest, the pictures they've released also have been a little, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something about the models that I've seen so far where I'm just kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, weird. Oh, dang it. Why is it when I scroll a little bit to go further, it just decides to go to the end? It makes me sad. All right. 100% on your take of Shatterpoint being their new baby. Yeah. Well, I mean, every company does that to some degree, but obviously you're going to focus on the new game when you make a new game. If you mean, like, Vince and I do that, we we've been focusing more on, Space Station Zero than on Reign in Hell, but Reign in Hell's not dead. It's just, I mean, there's still the community of people who are playing it and having a good time with it. And there's a Discord and all that kind of stuff that you can check out on the website. If you go to snarlingbadger.com, up in the top, there's a little Discord icon, so you can join up there. And there's different sections for, both of the games, and there'll be a section for the next game, and we'll just keep going forward with it. It's going to be great. But again, it's also not like we are going to, it's a difference when you've got something that's basically one release and we're like, but if you're like, well, this is going to be a new ecosystem that we're going to keep feeding. We're going to come out with new models and come out with terrain and come out with all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. When you're doing that, you're focusing a lot on, it's kind of like when there's a switch from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 kind of situation. You know what I mean? You start going, listen, we're going to start heading in this new direction. And yeah, some of the games will come out for both the old system and the new system, but eventually they're going to not anymore. And so it's a thing. I don't know, with the way that, like I said, that Vince and I like to do it, people have been like, well, if you're not coming out with anything new for the game, then it's dead. And I'm like, you can still buy it. Like, it's still, it'll always be available, unless we physically take it down for some reason, but you'll always be able to get it. I can understand when a game goes out of print and you're not making any more versions, that people can say to some degree that that game is dead. People who already own the game, it's not dead to them. But, if you're like, I can't get into the game anymore because I can't buy it, but I don't know. It's a difference between being a company that just sells rule sets and a company that sells rule sets and also miniatures, I think. And also, they didn't do Legion. Legion was sort of dropped on them by Asmodee. Shatterpoint they did. So yeah, I can definitely see that too. Not especially sold on Star Wars theme, but AMG have proved themselves to me with Crisis Protocol. Good, clean, fast system. I got to get an actual demo. I have watched multiple games, both at my local shop and at Gen Con, both this year and when it was first launched in 2019. And although this, I mean, obviously they've changed a bunch of the cards and stuff like that in the new version or whatever. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Part of it also is that it does not seem as much as a war game. It seems, I don't want to say it seems board gamey, but it is really more, at least the games that I've watched, it's been a lot about like, oh, you got to get all these objectives and get it, away or whatever. And it almost becomes a little bit more like, the games that I've watched have seemed just a tiny little bit more like a sport, because it's not about killing Iron Man. Because, well, you don't want to kill Iron Man. I mean, he's Iron Man. You're not supposed to do that, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how different the Shatterpoint is from Crisis Protocol as well. So yeah. I don't know why they didn't go Mandalorians versus Ashoka for a 2023 launch, knowing that there's coming in 6. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Darth Maul's going to come back and be in the show a bunch or something like that. Or maybe, I don't know. Maybe they're letting us know something. You know what I mean? Shatterpoint sounds like a Netrunner expansion. Yes, yes, it does. You're right. Stuff like this is why I quit buying Star Wars and Star Trek tabletop games. The licenses keep moving and new games keep coming out. Even if you find a game you like, it gets replaced with another. Capitalism. Welcome to it. Yep. For sure. And again, I understand from a selling point why going with a game license like anything, Marvel, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, etc., makes sense, because there are people who are like, oh, I like that thing, so maybe I'll try out this game. That's a thing. That's what happens. But I don't know. I personally like being able to kind of work in the fringes and not have to be like, well, this guy, obviously we've all seen him in the movies, so we know what he looks like, and we know what his deal is, and so it's already predetermined. I like making my own deal. Let's say that. Weirdly, the company that published the 80s and 90s Star Wars RPG released another RPG called Shatter Zone. Shatterpoint makes me think of that more than Star Wars. Interesting. Really like the look of Shatterpoint. Too bad it looks like a different scale than Legion. I mean, it does look like a different scale. Yeah. I think I have all the pieces I need to make my scrap tank for the last war now. Nice. Got my last war shipping notice this morning. Oh, nice. I'll have to check my email. Let's see. How do I approach my pile of shame of unwanted miniatures? Slowly, no sudden movements. Honestly, just find a thing in it that you really just think is cool and then just start working on it and do one thing. You know, I've made videos about that in the past. Like, do one thing. Be like, I'm going to paint this guy's boot. You know what I mean? So you get your brown paint or your black paint or whatever color the boots might be. Maybe the guy is a go-go dancer and you need white boots. Whatever, that's fine. So you get your paint and you start and you work on that boot and you get it done. And then you're like, all right, cool. Well, then you're like, well, I mean, I should probably paint the other boot. I'm already here, right? And then now you've got both boots painted, and now you're like, well, maybe the pants, that might be a bad idea. And then you just, you have to kind of trick your brain sometimes into just being like, just do one thing, and then that'll hopefully start to snowball a little bit. You know what I mean? Go from there. Sample. I know. I don't know why I can't remember that word. I saw that Modifius is selling STLs for their Star Trek RPG minis. I find this an interesting thing as it's a huge IP. What are your thoughts? Could be a big change. I mean, I'm assuming, and Modifius is a big enough company that I'm sure they've got their ducks in a row. I am assuming that they have got the licensing to do so. I'm sure that Paramount, who I think still owns Star Trek, right, is probably like, you want to do what now? And they're like, we want to sell STLs so people can 3D print these models and stuff like that. And they're like, sure, yeah, that sounds great. I don't know what you just said, but great, knock yourself out. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's part of the licensing deal and they were able to do that. And I think that you'll see more of that with some licenses. Here's the deal. Paramount has always been a little bit, I don't want to say lax, but years and years and years ago, a long time ago, before most of you were born, when I was in high school, I was in I had a couple of friends, and the three of us made a fanzine, which is basically like, it's a zine. It's like a photocopied like magazine. And this is pre-internet, so we couldn't email people and stuff like that. So we would make this fanzine, and it was a Star Trek fanzine. My two friends, Fletch and David, they were the writers, and then I was the art director and all that kind of stuff. And then Fletch's grandparents bought him a used like photocopier from church or something like that could do 11 by 17, which at the time was kind of crazy. So he had this old photocopier in his basement, and we would mock up these fanzines, and then we had subscribers because there was this fanzine called Datazine that you could buy, and it was just a zine of zines. It just was like, it was like, oh, are you interested in Mad Max? You're interested in Star Wars? You're interested in this? And then you could get all these addresses and send a self-addressed stamped envelope and all this kind of crazy old-timey stuff. And then you would subscribe to these zines, and you would get these photocopied things once every while. And there would be like weird stories written about like Star Trek. Like ours was all about Star Trek. And so long story short is there were certain ones that would pop up that companies would be like, no, you can't do that. That's our IP. That's our intellectual property. You can't do that. Case in point, there were websites that popped up at the beginning of the web that were fan sites for X-Files. And 20th Century Fox was like, nope, put a kibosh on that. You guys can't do that. And it was known as being foxed back then. But Paramount was like, okay, cool. You want to write fan content for our stuff? That's cool. Then knock yourself out. Now, let's take a look and see how much Star Trek there still is around. I know there are currently at least 3 shows that I can think of, maybe 4, that are still in progress right now. And let's see how many X-Files shows there are currently still available out there. So Paramount has always been pretty cool with letting people kind of like be fans and make things, based off of that. And the fact that they're working already with Modifius and they have a license thing, like, to me, Star Trek going, yeah, that's cool. You can make 3D printable stuff for your as part of your license. That doesn't surprise me at all. If Fox did it, that would surprise me. So yeah, that was a long story to tell you that that I agree. I don't know. Players near me are predicting / hoping Shatterpoint and Crisis Protocol will be compatible. Thoughts? I'd rather they concentrate on making the game feel like Star Wars. I agree. I wish that they would make it feel like more like Star Wars if it's compatible. Like, honestly, and I was thinking about this already, making it so that Star Wars dudes can show up in Marvel Crisis Protocol seems very comic booky. It seems on brand. You'd be like, you know, oh, there was a time rift and, you know, and that kind of stuff. That jazz happens all the time. You know, I know I own a book where Batman is fighting against the Predator. So, I mean, like, that's, you know, anyway. But the other way around doesn't seem to be making any sense. So, best case scenario is they write special Marvel rules that allow you to bring in some Star Wars Shatterpoint people, but not the other way around. You know what I mean? And hopefully the games are not, hopefully it's not just like the same rules, but with a different skin on it. It shouldn't be, in my opinion. Like, that would be the worst case scenario if they just took the Marvel rules, which are very comic booky and stuff like that, and they said, let's just use that exact same rule set and then just throw in some R2-D2s and crap. No, don't. Man, I hope they don't do that. It should be a different rule set, in my opinion. Everything scrolled. White boots equals go-go dancer, so all stormtroopers are basically go-go dancers. I mean, they never show you that part in the movies, but believe me, it happens. That's why they can't shoot. Is they're much better dancers than marksmans. Shatterpoint being a different scale was an immediate nope for me. If Kill Team was a different scale, the story would be the same. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that. Torn on the different scale, says Altrose. On one hand, I want it to be compatible with Legion. On the other, I enjoy having larger minis to work on. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are like, I like painting larger minis, and I get that. I, Lord knows, don't want to paint 15mm people or 6mm people, but certainly not 15mm people, because that seems like really hard. It just, I don't know. And I know a lot of people are like, no, it's just easier. You just go, there you go. There's your head painted, done. You know, and but I don't. Yeah, that's not what I enjoy. I don't know. Let's see here. Meanwhile, I'm over here still debating on taking the plunge on some Elder Scrolls Call of Arms stuff while I still have a bunch of stuff for other games in my pile of shame. Yeah, I can understand that. I don't think being objective-based makes a gameplay more like a sport. Malifaux is another of my faves, and it's not all about the kill. It's a personal opinion thing for me. Like, I feel like a game should be about trying to shoot the other dudes. I mean, there should be objectives, but you're trying to shoot the other folks or fight the other folks or whatever the deal is. And yeah, I mean, it's, again, personal preference. So I totally understand that. But for me, as I've watched it, it seems like, other than just moving objectives around and stuff like that, that doesn't seem like sometimes there's as much going on as I would like. Just, again, personal preference. Let's see here. This is why I've been gravitating towards stuff like Turnip 28 and Swill. I'm looking forward to Swill quite a bit. Swill, if you haven't heard, is Turnip 28, but there's like a tank and then like some troops. It's not out yet. Max is working on it, but it is heading in that direction. He's kind of announced it and all that kind of stuff. So very much looking forward to that. Because I love the concept of Turnip 28, but again, it's heading towards a little bit more of an army style game, and I'm not, you know, I love the modeling and stuff like that. But what I want was originally, and I even mentioned this to Max, I'm like, I want Turnip 28, but with, again, 5 to 10 guys. That's what I want. And so Swill I did not make him do this. It was not, I'm sure I didn't even, spark it in him. He was probably already working on it. But then when I mentioned that to him, because he was like, oh, I got something coming. And then recently he's announced that Swill is the next thing. Compatible with Turnip 28, which is good. So got that going for you. Seen some negative feedback on Shatterpoint. I'm on the fence. Again, like literally, I am just reacting to the fact that it's obviously not Legion models, so it is a separate game. It is also looks to be bigger models, so I'm gonna guess. I'm not a scientist over here, but because AMG went 40 millimeter with Marvel, I'm betting just from looking at these images that they're probably 40 millimeter. And so now the problem is that the upside to Marvel being 40 millimeter, and I forget exactly what the letter scale is, but 40 millimeter is almost identical to a specific train scale. Like if you're into like trains, you know, like choo-choo railroad trains, like, you know, the train boards and all that stuff. There's a specific scale of building or whatever that you can buy at a local train railroad shop, you know, that will work. And because generally, you know, comic book stuff, a lot of it happens in the modern day. If you could just go buy a cool little apartment building and then like a Starbucks and this and that, you can put that stuff down there and you already got a bunch of terrain. And a lot of that stuff is really nice and not crazy expensive. Since they've launched it, they've started creating their own terrain too. They've got apartment buildings and dump trucks and all kinds of crazy stuff like that and whatever. And that's great. None of that stuff is going to be compatible with Star Wars game because it's Star Wars. So, you know, a Starbucks doesn't make sense. That's really more of a Battlestar Galactica thing. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's very weird. Let's see here. STLs, that's crypto stuff, right? Sounds like a great plan. Could be that too. Good point. I hadn't thought of that. Ducks in a Row could be an awesome tabletop skirmish, especially if you had cyborg ducks. Ducks in a Row is probably a board game, possibly 3 different board games at this point. I'm sure that there's a board game out there probably called Ducks in a Row. If not, one of you should make it because I think it would sell. When I think of Star Wars, I think of huge scale battles. If it was just additional rules, sure, but I don't think I want to buy additional models of the ones I already have. See, when I think of Star Wars, I think of like people running around in the Death Star and like coming around a corner and shooting some people and then whatever. Like the only like big scale battles that I think of are either space battles in like, let's say Return of the Jedi, or the prequel movies where you got the Clone Wars and there's like giant crazy walking robot spider droids and this and that and the rolling thing and all that kind of stuff. Sure, that happened. But I grew up watching movies 4, 5, and 6. Like I saw the original Star Wars Episode 4, New Hope, which they didn't really call it back then. It was just Star Wars. I saw that in the theater when it first came out. I was like 7. So that was about a small group of people doing a thing and whatever. And sure, there were some times when you'd see a bunch of stormtroopers, but not like a lot, right? There'd be some. It wasn't until the prequel movies when you had just like, you know, tons and tons of Gungans fighting against droids and stuff like that. And that's fine too. But I just wish that there was something a little bit smaller in that realm. Nixon was in office when I was born, says Pumpernickel Pickle. Then you're probably older than me. No, now that you mention it, I think Nixon was in office when I was born. No, they can, yeah. I remember buying fanzines at the record shop. Can't have been long ago, like last year or something. Exactly. Yeah, no, just real recently. Your friends Fletch and Dave, were you in OG Depeche Mode? I wasn't. No. What makes Kill Team so good is it uses the same minis as the bigger game. I mean, that is a benefit, and it's a smart move too, because, and this is why I'm kind of flummoxed by this whole Shatterpoint thing. If you want to get people into your bigger army game, you start by giving them a smaller game with the same models, and then you can go, hey, look, these models, you can use them in the bigger game when you decide to get to that point, which is exactly what they're doing with Warcry and Kill Team. They're like, hey, look, you can use these models, and then you can pull those into Age of Sigmar later on. And it's whether you just decide to buy regular Age of Sigmar models and make warbands of them, like Skaven or Night Haunts or Stormcast or stuff like that. I'm just thinking of the 3 most recent that I was literally looking at down in the basement. But you could also do the Corvus Cabal and the Unmade and the Iron Golems and stuff like that. And then they've released, here's a stat block for those to bring them into as a force into Age of Sigmar. And they've even done the same thing with I don't know why I'm pointing over there, but there was a box over there. Underworlds, Warhammer Underworlds. So in Warhammer Underworlds, you can also bring those models into Age of Sigmar if you want to as well, and they've got stats available for that. It's all kind of funneling people towards the big army game in the theory that that's where you spend the most money. But honestly, you also, if you miss, okay, so if you miss as Games Workshop and you don't get this person to actually move into Age of Sigmar or move into 40K, you might instead still pick up a decent amount of money by them owning 5 or 10 different kill teams or 5 or 10 different, Warcry warbands. So they may not have a single army of this many models, but they might have 10 small armies of that many models, all told when you add them all together. It just makes sense when you're like, hey, we made this other game that's related to this game in story, because they're both Star Wars, but they're completely incompatible, and this one will not get you to go into this one, because if you buy into this one, you get that sunk cost fallacy of going, well, I already spent a bunch of money on these tall guys, and now if I want to play this little guys, I got to buy something separate. That doesn't necessarily, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. I believe probably, if I had to guess, it could be a situation of two things. It could be them thinking, well, Star Wars people love Star Wars so much that they'll just buy both games because Star Wars. That's possible. Now, my thought was then, are they going to make Marvel Legion like a game that is like an army game with Marvel? But no, because that doesn't make sense. Like you mentioned, there are big army scenes, big giant battle scenes in Star Wars, but there's also small little engagements as well. You don't generally see an army of superheroes, like a whole, rank and flank kind of army of superheroes. Those stories are generally a little bit more small group versus small group type thing, but not always, but generally. Imagine a miniature game that is released like Gundam are. Miniature parts are printed in colored plastic, skin parts printed in skin color. Still opportunity to paint, but base colors in the mini. It wouldn't work. Here's why. The reason that you can have different colors in Gundam is because they are like a plate attached to a plate attached to a thing that goes over it, and it's metal parts butting up against metal parts and things like that. To make the skin a different color than the hat, you then have to be able to, like, the way that the models get made is usually the face and the hat are all one part. It's pretty rare that you would, especially when you're talking about 28 millimeter. Now, if you were making like people that were Gundam sized, probably you could maybe pull that off, but it's real hard to get people to be like, well, put the tiny little brown beard, glue it onto the Caucasian color face, and then the blue hat piece of plastic. That's, let's be perfectly frank, Malifaux miniatures have a tendency, there are certain Malifaux miniatures where you glue the beard on separately, like a little tiny beard that gets lost very easily. But yeah, I don't know. With robots, I think it works better than it would with people. And it's just because of the way that the molding is done. They usually don't want to differentiate between, your chest plate and your neck sticking out of the top of it. And to have those in separate colors of plastic, I think, again, in a 28 millimeter miniature, I think that would be way too difficult. Without fanzines in Star Trek, we would not have Mary Sue. I don't know who Mary Sue is, sorry. About the shown minis so far for Shatterpoint, I think naming the game Star Wars Spread Out would have been a better choice. They're spreading. There's a lot of them that are standing in very, yes, they're definitely, there's a lot of, yeah, you're right. You're not wrong. Everyone, like, I mean, I get it. You don't necessarily want to stand there with your feet together. That you get knocked over easily that way if you're, in battle. I don't know. Yeah, they are interesting poses, and I'm not necessarily meaning in a great way. New meaning to a commander telling their squad to spread out. Nice. Let's see here. Well, sure, Battle of Hoth. I guess that's true. I'd forgotten about the Battle of Hoth. Is it O scale? Is that what it was? the 40 millimeter? What is, man? Scrolling way back. There we go. I'm glad to see GW allowing for more merch and licensed products. It may be progress. Yeah, I mean, they've been doing it now for a while, a little bit. Like last 5 years, all of a sudden now you can start to buy things that they're, it makes sense. If you've got a popular IP and you can make money off of it, yeah. Let's see here. Jonah Hex and Batman and Ninja Turtles versus the Predator. That probably happened. I don't know. Like I said, I know I've got a book somewhere in a long box that is Batman versus Predator. And maybe also Batman versus Judge Dredd. I swear there was something like that too. They mentioned terrain and elevation playing an important part in Shatterpoint, and they don't really in MCP, so I imagine the rules won't be exact. Yeah, I think it would be real dumb of them to make the rules exactly the same, just tweak it. I think that they would have to make stuff different, for sure. Like, are they trying to hurt Legion? It depends on who you talk to. I don't think so, but I feel like they don't want to focus on it because it's not their baby, What's the scale of Shatterpoint? They haven't said, which is interesting. But most of us, at least just from the imagery, I got to be honest, I'm pretty sure it's probably 40 millimeter, which would make sense because it's the same stuff as Marvel Crisis Protocol, whatnot. If you want Dancing Stormtroopers, look up all about that base. No Rebels. Gotcha. I think I've seen that. Let's see here. It's all about 36 millimeters, the sweet spot. That's the scale I print my minis at. I hope the new Star Wars game is fun. The release date seems far out. Well, it's only July or summer of 2023, right? So it's next summer. That doesn't seem that far out. It'll probably be released at Gen Con is most likely. Well, did they say July or summer? Hang on. I got a thing. Coming summer 2023. So yeah, I'll bet you $1 that that's probably going to be Gen Con. Yeah, most likely that. My friend group put out a fanzine for a while based on video game reviews, and I used to collect a Godzilla-based fanzine. The old times. Yeah, no, I enjoyed the zines, man. Yeah. So stoked to hear that I can get those Star Trek minis, even if I have to pay someone to print them. I was super bummed when the resin ones sold out. I think it makes a lot of sense for companies who want longevity in their games. If they make, again, let's say resin, they make some resin models. If you're going plastic, you probably don't have to worry about it as much, because if you go with metal molds, you can crank out zillions and zillions and zillions of plastic and it'll be fine. Resin, you're going to go through rubber molds quickly, and you might decide, look, this is the tipping point at which we stop making these. And so we make X amount of resin, boom, once they're gone, and then we sell the STL, and then that's just extra money. As opposed to just being like, once they're gone, and you can't get them anymore, and we don't make any more money off of it, doesn't make any sense. But if you can be like somebody who's like, man, I want those, and you're like, yeah, we sold out of the resin ones, but you can buy the STL, and they'll be like, okay, cool. And they buy the STL, boom, and you made a little bit more money. It just makes sense for stuff that is, like, you've already got the STL, you sculpted the thing anyway, right? Probably in some sort of, like, that's how you made well, I guess if you still are a company that works completely in like sculpting and putty and hand done stuff, different story. Although, well, you get that stuff scanned these days. I know that Nick Evans from Mammoth Miniatures, which is they do Planet 28 and etc. He has started going through and doing a lot of sculpting, and then I think at his day job he has access to a really super fancy 3D scanner. So he's been doing hand sculpting and then 3D scanning it, and then he can make an STL of the stuff that he hand sculpted, and then prints it. And it's cool. I think it's a neat concept. Making a skirmish agnostic game. Any advice? Start by building an audience. Just really, honestly, step one is do something like podcast, blog, YouTube channel, Twitch stream, I was going to say Twitter, but yeah, start building an audience as you are writing it and work on that. Because the thing is if you produce a game, I don't care what kind of game it is, you produce a game and then you're like, all right, ta-da, here it is, it's out there. No one will know because that's not how the internet works. It doesn't just come to your door. You have to get people's eyeballs to look at it. And more often than not, that takes money. That takes, okay, now I have to spend a bunch of money to get marketing, or I have to, there's a lot of things that you have to do. Like big, super successful Kickstarters don't just happen because they're cool concepts. They happen because they spent a buttload of marketing money to get people to come and go look at the Kickstarter and go, oh, look at that. Like it, yeah. So if you can build an audience, you need to build an audience, because then once you finally have your product, you can be, hey audience, you like the things that I like to some degree. Otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. I made this and I like it, and maybe you'll like it. And then there you go. I honestly believe that that's the strong way to get a lot of these things done, whether it's games, whether it's you decide you want to start writing novels, you want to start music, like all these different things. You kind of need to build an audience and give value to the people who are looking at your posts, watching your videos, whatever, so that when the time comes and you go, hey, I've made this thing, then they're like, well, I like what you do here and here and here and here, so maybe I'll probably like this as well. That's just, they call it content marketing, but it's, yeah. For those interested in Shatterpoint, they did open up applications for playtesters. Oh, that's pretty cool. Part of me is like, oh, cool, I'll be able to get an Ahsoka mini to paint from an official source, but that's about the extent of my interest. Well, there you go. According to the measurement guidelines, I have an 11.5 millimeter scale model with my Gundam pilot. There you go. There has been confirmation that Shatterpoint uses 38 millimeter for its base size, which means it's also different from MCP, which uses 40. I mean, barely, but that's also weird. I don't know why they would decide to change the scale ever so slightly like that. Like, honestly, the difference between 38 and 40 is negligible, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen that though yet about what the scale is, so. I'd rather have skirmish fights for figure models, but I'd love some Star Wars destroyer size based battles. I mean, that's what Armada was designed to do, for space battles that were, big capital ships fighting other capital ships and stuff like that. I'm surprised they didn't just follow the GW model of here are these games, but here's how you can merge it into our largest primary game. Exactly. Yeah, that is surprising to me. I think when Star Wars battles, I think of Hoth and Endor and a highlight of Geonosis. Like, Hoth was a big battle. I don't remember Endor being that big. I mean, it was kind of big, I guess, but yeah, Battle of Hoth, definitely. For some reason, licensed universes like Star Wars appeal to me as an RPG setting, but not as war games, especially when games like Legion and Shatterpoint are focused on canon-named characters. Yeah. Well, like, RPGs are generally not focused on canon-named characters. I think you're right. I think that's one of the things that, like my wife and I have really been enjoying Andor, and I think it's because you're seeing the TV show. It's because you're seeing the Star Wars universe from a different angle. You're seeing it, definitely not like running around Jedis and it's different, and I kind of like that. And I think that that's what's interesting about playing a game that maybe fits within that world, Star Wars, for example, but you're not going to be playing in an RPG as Luke Skywalker. You're going to be, maybe you might meet Luke Skywalker if your, DM is feeling saucy, but in general, you're going to be playing within that world and maybe hearing about these things, but you're going to be doing your own stories. With miniature games, there's not as much story, obviously, as there is in an RPG, unless your miniature game is kind of off the hook. But yeah. I remember seeing fanzines at Trek cons in the late 80s and early 90s. Wish we had still some of those cons locally. Yeah, I remember going to a sci-fi convention when I was in high school. That was a lot of fun. My war cry is not in the face. Makes sense. Let's see here. Uncle Adam, have you tried Brutality? I've heard of it, but I've not tried it. Wanting to get into 40K got me into Kill Team. Playing 40K is what got me back into Kill Team. Skipped Age of Sigmar and went to Warcry. Nice. I suspect the actual terms of the Star Wars tabletop license have something to do with this too. Yeah, I could see that. Companies always imagine a mythical audience out there for whatever dumb new product they have 100% of the time. Marketing people can be like that. As a person who has been a marketing person, yeah, no. I mean, it's hard, I think, to do your business from a place of pessimism and be like, well, no one's going to like this. I mean, but it's definitely a situation where you want to look at things and try to be a little bit more realistic and go, well, this'll be of interest to some more people of this kind of blah, 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 whatever. But the whole concept of like, oh, they're going to go nuts for it and we're going to sell a zillion of them is just someone trying to make sure that their job is, I think, a little bit more stable. And that's kind of hard to do. I don't know. Let's see here. They always seem to want new products to be developed, not just keep producing the same stuff. Yeah. I mean, you know, we've had people ask Vince and I, like, well, why didn't you just, like, when you guys made Rain in Hell, why didn't you just keep making like a new thing for Rain in Hell and another thing for Rain in Hell and another thing? Because, like, you know, that's what most companies do these days, is they come up with a game and then they just kind of, okay, well, that's cool. Let's make an expansion for it. Let's make an expansion for it. I mean, we did make one expansion for Rain in Hell only because we had a lot of people ask us about solo and co-op play. And we were like, yeah, we probably should have put that in there. So we made the little expansion, Oculus Spear. For Space Station Zero, we didn't make an expansion because we put in the solo and co-op stuff right from the beginning. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make a game that I expect to become somebody's like hobby. I want a game to be something that somebody who is a wargaming hobbyist plays once in a while. Maybe they get stuck on it with their friends and they play it a campaign and they play it for 2 months, you know, every other week, or they play it every Saturday or whatever the deal is, or they play it for a quarter or whatever, and then they don't play it for a while and they play some other stuff, and then maybe they come back to it when they decide, oh, well, I want to try out a different thing or whatever. Like, it's not, I mean, again, we're also selling the books for pretty inexpensively. So, you know, if I was to sell you a book for $50, I could, as the person paying $50, be like, well, I better get a bunch of use out of this. This better become my new hobby. But if I sell you a book for $18, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. I got this book. I read it. I played it, you know, X amount of times with some friends. I taught a friend about it. That's cool. And now I'm going to play something else. Maybe I'll come back to this. That's how I like to play. I don't want to just be like, I am a such and such player and this is the one game I want to play. I'm not saying that you're wrong if you want to do that. You should do that if you want to. But I think that too many people out there who come into the hobby of wargaming think, well, you got to only just play one game. You can't play multiple games because then you're like wasting time. You should only ever just play one game so that you can get super good at it so you become king of the world of that game, which is never going to happen. Yeah, I don't know. I've got ideas. Let's see here. Honestly, one thing that is upsetting about Shatterpoint is that I'm trying to build a community for Legion at my FLGS, and this game has already had a decent amount of people say that they'll just wait. Yeah, I know. Again, like I said, it feels to me like to some degree they are splitting their audience. Like, if you're like, okay, cool, if you don't like Marvel, hey, how about the Star Wars? Okay, that makes sense. Like, you know, again, going back to me and Vince, first game was kind of fantasy, second game is sci-fi, because there were people who were like, I don't like demons. I mean, I want to buy your game, but I don't like demons. They're scary, or they're against my religion, or I just don't like the concept of them, or they're icky, or whatever. Or, hey, I don't like games with no shooting. I want there to be not just hand-to-hand. That I get that too. So, you know, you make up some different games so people who maybe don't like this game will like this one or something like that. But to go, hey, you already like Star Wars, let's make a second Star Wars game. I don't know. Yoland's, or what was his name? Dang it, it scrolled again. Yeah, it was the what's his name? The guy who the beard, Yan Lo's beard. That's who it was. Yan Lo is a character from Malifaux, and his beard, little tiny, like kind of like goatee little thing, was this tiny separate piece from his face. It was not molded into his face, and so you had to glue it on. And a lot of people were just like, "Oh, that's gone. I don't know. It's in the carpet now. It's, you know, just boom, gone. Clip it off that thing and gone." So yeah. Legion and Shatter aren't same scale. No, they are not. Well, no, we're 99% sure they're not. They kind of haven't said, at least not that I've seen. Maybe they've gone on Twitter and said something. I don't know that I follow them on Twitter. I probably ought to. I don't know if I do or not. As a Legion player, I'm okay with Shatterpoint being a different scale. Comparison between Kill Team and 40K is different as GW make money off of selling rulebooks and army books. AMG have free rules to download. Yes, that is true. I can understand why they would not make an entire new... Well, I was going to say I can understand why they wouldn't make an entire new Skirmish version to use the models they already have because they wouldn't be selling the books. They did make technically a Skirmish version of Legion, except instead of being an 800-point list, it's a 500-point list, and it's basically kind of this exact same type of thing. So when they announced Skirmish, I was like, yes. And then I read it and I was like, that's not what that word means. So, yeah, they got to make more money, obviously, you know, God forbid. So I get that. And, but that being said, they also could have released this is the way I would have done it. I would have released a box that is, let's say we call it Shatterpoint for just reasons. It's a Shatterpoint box, comes with a bunch of new models that are also the same scale as Legion. And then you could take those models and use them and just play Shatterpoint with them. Or you could then take those models and then also have stats to bring them into Legion. And then also you would have stats to be able to bring Legion, you know, so they would be releasing models that they don't release now, like special built squads. You know, here's a cool Shatterpoint squad. Boom, there you go. Here's a box. Like, focus on selling those models. Don't just say, let's make a set of rules that Legion players can use their models that they already own with, and let's put the rules out there for free. I get that. But there's something they could have done in that situation, in my opinion. Now, that being said, it would probably also, well, I was going to say it would really bring a bunch of goodwill if they would actually make a real true Skirmish game that used Legion models, but then people would be like, cool, now I'm not going to buy Shadowpoint or whatever, and so they're obviously not going to do that. Shatterpoint? I keep saying Shadowpoint. So you can just point at a shadow. I don't know. Or you make a shadow on the wall that's pointing. Anyway. Let's see here. I already read that one. Hello from Spirit Lake. Good morning, Uncle Adam. How's it going? Not too bad. It's sunny out. Looking at the back right hidden mini, I think they used some pose doll reuse that looked suspiciously like Iron Man, Captain Marvel pose. I'm not sure which image you're talking about, but there is definitely, looking at the models that they've shown off so far, I'm like, at the very least, it might be the same sculptor who did a majority of the Marvel stuff. I could be wrong, but it does have that vibe. You're not wrong. I would rather it not be a different scale, but that's a terrain issue more than anything. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is that, you know, people talk about like, yeah, but this, you know, this is scale, it's more fun to paint. And you're like, yeah, but now I've got to try to come up with all new terrain. Like, I had a bunch of people in Friday's video who were like, you should definitely do a battle report with those big action figure guys. And I'm like, where am I going to get terrain? Like, that's going to be big, like real big terrain that I'm going to have to build or something. Like, I can't like go to the train store and just be like, give me Mongo scale, please. Like, that's not the thing that they have. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see. Star Trek became something that it was not meant to be. The original series was created as Wagon Train to the Stars. Interesting. Speaking of Batman, rip Kevin Conroy, #1 Batman in my heart. I never really watched the animated series much, but I know a lot of people, it was their favorite. But I never really watched it. Let's see here. I read Batman versus Ninja Turtles. It was a little weird, but good. I mean, that's like a comic book thing. Like, comic books are all about like the cross, you know, back and forth stuff and whatever. So yeah, I totally get that. How long do you think till they start making what's been going on lore for the Leagues of Votan? I've really gotten into GW lore lately. Hey, Catmaster. I don't know. I have no idea what that... Sorry, I don't know what that means. I don't get into the lore much at all. I like Eisenhorn and Ravnor books. I've listened to them multiple times, those entire series. I've read some of the other stuff. Ultramarines Omnibus, Space Wolves Omnibus. I started trying to read a book about Grey Knights and then fell asleep. It wasn't very good, I didn't think. But I don't know what... I mean, I know what Leagues of Votan are. The squads, I get that. But I don't know what, like, what's going on lore would be. Like, I don't know if... Have they released a book yet on the squads? Yeah, I don't know. I just finally got some Hearthkin from my local shop last week. Yes, I just got some Hearthkin. So I'm going to start kit bashing those guys and doing a bunch of weird stuff with them, I think. Let's see here. Apparently they want to run demos at Adepticon. Like prelim demos of Shatterpoint? I could see that. That makes sense. I'm 65 inches tall. Does that make me 1/65th scale? I don't know. That's a good question. I'm making a couple of zines now. My Apple Pencil died, so my art is at a standstill. But when it's done, I'd like to send you a copy. Oh, that's cool. I've got, if you go to the YouTube channel page on YouTube, so it would be youtube.com/tabletopminions. There's a bunch of tabs across the top. One of them says About. And if you click on the About, there is a shipping address, P.O. Boxy kind of thing in there. And so that's how you, if you want to send me stuff, that's where you find it. Unless it's a email, like if it's a PDF, then that's a different thing altogether. There's the email address in there as well. So let's see here. Which GW would have an official Shapeways store for epic 8mm 40K RIP specialist games? Yeah, GW doesn't seem to want to ever get into 3D printing at all. I mean, obviously they use it themselves internally. Everybody does in the sculpting world. If you make miniatures, you definitely are getting things 3D printed to look at it and go, oh yeah, that arm looks weird, you know, or whatever. You sometimes just can't notice that stuff when you're spinning it around on your computer screen or whatever. But yeah, I think it's going to be a real long time before GW starts giving or selling or doing anything with STLs as part of their business. So Legions is 15mm scale and Shatter is 38. No, Legions is like 28/30mm scale. So like kind of roughly normal, like GW size roughly. And it looks like Shatterpoint or whatever is going to be closer to the Marvel Crisis Protocol size, which those guys are a good deal bigger, closer to 40mm. Build audience, have rabid fans, shout out your new skirmish game at every opportunity of success. 5 parsecs from home. There you go, see? Help, I am trapped under a cat. That's pretty nice. I like it when that happens. It doesn't happen too frequently. Diesel has become more of a lap sitter as he has gotten older, but he only sits on my lap, but I don't know why. For years, he has laid on my wife's legs, like this almost. But he just like sits on my lap and then I pet him for a while and then it's usually for about 2 minutes and he's like, well, I gotta go. And then he goes and does other stuff. I just added lights to some of my terrain, my gas station, taco stand, and burger shop. Nice. You play in the dark then. I made a mini agnostic game, launched, no attention at all. I mean, that's the thing. Just because you make something and put it out on the internet doesn't mean people will come and look at it. You have to get their attention in some fashion, usually via marketing, via, you know, again, like I said, most of the big Kickstarters out there that make bank, or even the ones that don't, they still have a huge marketing budget. Like I'm sure that what was the new game? What's the Kickstarter that Black Magic Craft, Idols of Torment. I believe it's Idols of Torment. It's Idols or Icons of Torment. I know it's definitely of Torment. I'm sure that he probably, you know, did sponsored content with a bunch of different creators and things like that and whatever to get the name out there. I know I was served up sponsored like ads on Facebook in the early days of the Kickstarter a bunch. So that's stuff that EL had to pay for. So yeah, you know, to get the word out there. Now, of course, he's also got his own YouTube channel that's quite large. And so he's got those people as well. But he, like, Vince and I don't like buy Facebook advertising and stuff like that with our game. You know, we've talked about it and we've been like, you know, should we? Maybe. But so we pretty much do the marketing through our channels and stuff like that, and talking to some people that, you know, work with us on these things a little bit and everything, then that's great. And he does the same thing, but he also went beyond that. And like I said, was at least doing Facebook ads. I don't know if he was doing like Twitter ads or anything like that. The Twitter app that I use seems to remove all the ads, which is awesome. It's called Twitterific, and it's on it's only on iOS only. I did not know that until recently, but yeah, it's on iOS only. Anyway, so my point is that just because you make a Kickstarter, let's say, and put it out there, that's not necessarily going to bring that's not the milkshake that's going to bring all the boys to the yard, as it were. You know what I mean? Kit bashing, they changed the scale to make it harder to kit bash Marvel in with Star Wars. Maybe. I don't know why you would do that. Like, because those characters are all so specific, if you were like, you know what, I want to put Iron Man's arms on, you know, Princess Leia's body or something like that, people would be like, why did you do that? That's weird. And you'd be like, yeah, I know, it's fun. But I don't know that, well, maybe that's what it is, but I don't know. Speaking about building an audience, haven't seen you around lately. Oh, you weren't talking to me. Sorry. I was like, gosh, I hope not. I'm here like every week or whatever. Well, not here. I hear them every other week, every other Sunday, strangely enough. Shatterpoint minis also seem to have ridiculously long legs, like they're all leg. Yeah, that is either due to being shot at a low angle. Yeah. Or just, yeah, they do have a lot of legs, don't they? Sometimes it's just dependent upon what the, hang on. Sometimes it's also just dependent upon what the, oh, I just don't have any pictures on this thing. That's crazy. Full press release. Does this have any more information? Oh, geez, it's a PDF. Thanks. Anyway, yeah, no. Sometimes it depends upon the, type of sculptor, like the not the whim of the sculptor, but the style of the sculptor. So there's that too. I can understand that. I got to be honest, I'm not crazy jazzed on, like, this is very cartoony looking art. So they're probably trying to mimic this cartoony, long, skinny limbed artwork going on as well. Like the cover of, now you might be like, well, what are they supposed to do? Use pictures from the movies? Well, I mean, maybe, depends on but again, depends on the licensing. They probably don't have the licensing for the movie imagery. Unlike like GW has the licensing for the movie imagery for the Lord of the Rings stuff. So all of the artwork pretty much in all of those books for the Lord of the Rings game stuff is all just stills from the movies, which totally makes sense. But then like what's his name? Mantic had rights to The Walking Dead, but not the Walking Dead TV show. So they didn't, you know what I mean? It was more the comics and stuff. So anyway, long story short, this artwork I feel is definitely got a style to it. And I feel like the models are kind of based off of this. And when you look at the models that were, or if you look at the cover artwork for the original Star Wars Legion box, it wasn't cartoony like this. It looked more like a painting. And that kind of came across a little bit more. This has got a different feel to it. And again, being AMG, being Atomic Mass Games, and their background with the comics and stuff like that, I'm wondering if that has something to do with it, but I don't know that for sure. All right, let's get, that's not what I wanted to do. That and that. And shoot, this and that. There we go. I really like Legion scale. It's small enough to do a big battle on a 4x6, but large enough to paint and have easily accessible details. Yeah, I think 28 millimeter, 30 millimeter, 32 millimeter is pretty much a sweet spot. People like Andor. Star Wars is an adventure-based story. It seems like they missed an opportunity by just making a cookie cutter skirmish game when they could have been more like, say, Space Station Zero. I don't know that it's for everybody. That's the trick. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate that's very nice, but I Space Station Zero is not necessarily, I think, for, like, there are people out there that are like, yeah, I just want to play a game where I get to kill my friends, and we have that technically. We do have a versus mode in the game. You can do that, but the game is specifically the 24 different kind of branching missions and stuff like that. It's about like working more in that solo to co-op mode and being, I don't want to say an RPG because it's certainly not, but it's got some of those elements, and it's not just a game where you sit down and just play, oh, let's just play a game and be okay. It's designed to be more of a campaign, and that's, again, not for everybody, but we're also not trying to target everybody, because if we did, we would have to make different types of games, and this is what we like to do. We're looking at a niche a little bit more, I guess. I don't know. Haven't rolled dice in anger in weeks, getting withdrawal symptoms. Well, that's, you know. I've got so much invested in Star Wars Legion that I can't justify getting into Shatterpoint. I think that they're going to see that from people. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily fail. I'm just saying there's going to be some people that are like, I'm playing both because that's totally cool. And there are going to be some folks that are going to be like, I don't want to get into another game that's basically nearly like the game that I'm currently playing and spending a bunch of money on. You know, I get that. I've got two entire starter sets painted and at least 50 or 20 of the boosters. Yep. Let's see here. Oh, and it scrolled again. Thank God for that. I think Shatterpoint was a Mace Windu novel. Yes, that's what I've heard. It's, if you just type in Star Wars Shatterpoint and then hit images, you do see a Mace Windu novel. Anytime scale changes outside of 28 to 32 millimeter, the barrier of entry grows dramatically unless you own a printer. Reusing everything I've already got makes the initial. Yeah, absolutely. If you look at, and that's why I like model agnostic stuff, is because I can be like, I built these guys because I think they're cool models. I can use them in this game, this game, and this game because they fit, you know? So yeah. In 2018, I got 2 of the Legion starter sets and then a bunch of the original trilogy boosters. Also got a bunch of 3D printed terrain. I would say all told, I spent about $500, give or take. Sure. Is Mungo scale bigger or smaller than Diesel scale? Mungo sounds bigger, though, doesn't it? Terrain is a problem. I have sci-fi and fantasy terrain bits for all the 28 millimeter. I can do new bits and use it for multiple games, but 40 millimeter not compatible with anything else. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, that was the big, initially when MCP, when Marvel Crisis Protocol was first announced and everything, I was like, what am I going to do for terrain? This is stupid. Because at the time, they didn't release any terrain. They just were like, hey, here's a starter box and some other stuff, and that was it. Now they've obviously been making lots of terrain. But in the early days, I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. And then a guy who was a store owner, I was at a trade conference thing in Nevada, and a guy who knew the channel and stuff was trying to not sell me the game, because I you know, but like sell me on the idea of the game. And he's like, Well, the thing that's cool is you can go into like a model railroad store and buy, and again, I think it was maybe O scale. You can just buy O scale buildings and they are the right size for 40 millimeter. So you can, buy like, again, like I said, fast food places or a convenience store or a little tiny, apartment building or whatever, that kind of stuff. And it's already ready to go. So you don't have to, wait for them to make terrain. They have, as of since, they have made terrain, but it was pretty easy to just go buy some stuff to be able to do that with at the model train store. Well, you can't do that with Star Wars. Usually they don't. I don't know why. I'm a little amazed that they haven't made like a model train set. Maybe they have model trains for Star Wars. I mean, there was that. What was that in the Solo movie? Didn't they try to steal stuff off of that weird, crazy like monorail train? They could have designed one of those and put those out there for kids. That would have been great. Kids loved that movie. I liked Solo a lot, but I don't know that kids did. All right. Wish that they would support the Star Wars games they already have instead of starting a new one. I've heard that a couple of times as well, yes. Will there be crossover with the tabletop RPG of Star Wars? I have not heard that at all. I don't know. Let's see here. Action figures require a pile of dirt or sandbox, some food packaging, and sticks or other found bits. No such terrain. I think action figure bat rep is in the spirit of free play. With Christmas on the horizon, I haven't any dough to spend for a while on hobby stuff beyond the odd bottle of paint or similar, so broke I can barely afford to pay attention. Well, luckily, Shatterpoint doesn't come out until this summer, so you'll be fine. I'm super interested in the story of how they survived or what they've been... Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so like a novel that explains where the squats have been all this time. I've been listening to the Horus Heresy series, and it makes me wonder about Votan history. I see what you're saying, Catmaster. I get you. Okay, so yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure that they'll write stuff like that. It would be weird of them not to, at least in my opinion. But yeah, that would be kind of interesting because they've basically just been sort of saying, oh yeah, no, they've been off doing stuff someplace and now they're back or whatever. And well, what were they doing? Like, what's going on? Star Wars Shadowpoint sounds so much better than Shatterpoint. They kind of sound the same to me, which is why I keep saying them wrong. And so I don't know. Getting too much stuff from all sorts of games can be greatly overwhelming. It's like not finishing a A++ video game before the next one catches your fancy. Well, except that, like, I think that, okay, so with games like Battlefront, no, not Battlefront, Battlefield, right? So the Battlefield video game series. And also to some degree with Call of Duty, they've been releasing them almost every year. EA just recently announced that they're going to stick with Battlefield 2042 for like another year. Like, instead of making another Battlefield game, because they have a tendency to make them every single year, just like they were like, no, we're just going to keep improving this one, which is an interesting move. I think a smart move. I would like to see them stop doing one a year. Let's keep making these. You know what I mean? Let's maybe do it every 2 years. Figure out a way. In a perfect world, they would collude with whoever makes Call of Duty, Activision, I think, which is why I'm not buying Call of Duty. Work with those folks so that Call of Duty comes out in 2023, and then the new Battlefield comes out in 2024, and then Call of Duty comes out in 2025. But it's when they go up against each other constantly every year that people are like, But if you spread them apart like that, I think it would make a little bit more sense. Just like I think GW needs to start making their books every 5 years instead of every 3 years, like the new stuff, 10th edition, which will be coming out this summer. We'll bet you $1. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it's a smart move to kind of go down that road because it also helps people with video games. there's like a wave that you ride, especially if you're playing the multiplayer. If you're playing a multiplayer video game, you're like, okay, cool, we're doing this and we're doing that, and people are playing it, and there's lots and lots of servers to hop into, and then boom, the next game comes along and everybody moves over to that next game, and now there's fewer people playing this game. It's the same kind of deal, right? So I have a lot of noises going on. The concept generally is that, you know, with tabletop games, you can play that game 5 years from now. You can play it 3 years from now. You can play it as long as you can find someone to play against. Be like, hey, let's sit down and play. You can keep playing it. It's not a situation of like, oh, the servers are like, there's nobody on the servers anymore. Although we're starting to see with video games, like right now, Battlefield 1, which is the World War I game, is super popular again because they put it on super cheap sale and the servers are full. There are like, I just watched a video recently where the guy was talking about how there were 50,000 people playing Battlefield 1, which is a 7-year-old game, I think. They were all playing like on Steam. That was like the current, you know, concurrent or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe the video game industry is getting a little bit smarter and realizing that if they keep releasing a new game every year, people stop caring and they need to put a little bit more space in there. I don't know. We'll see. I would love, again, like I said, for Games Workshop to start realizing that they should also slow down a little bit too. But, you know. Uncle Adam, you doing Origins next June? I don't know. I don't currently have plans to, but I don't know for sure. There's a possibility, but I don't know. We have 4 cats. Cat trapping is a constant issue here. Cat trapping when they lay on your chest and you need to get out of bed is really counterproductive. Yeah, that we do. Maggie, in the mornings, will lay on my chest sometimes, and then that is much more difficult to get out of the beds there. Yeah. Idols of is correct. Yeah. I couldn't remember if it was idols or icons. I do live streams on Facebook, and I try to make a point of talking to all the applicable groups without being too advertising. I'm not sure what that's related to. Let's see here. Shatterpoint seems more Clone Wars cartoon than movie. Yeah, that artwork does, for sure. I get that. Yeah. Don't like the Shatterpoint art style at all. Feels like Marvel Comics to me, not my jam. Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's personal preference, but I agree with you. Do you think they're going to spin down Legion because of this? I don't think so. I'm wondering if... See, here's the deal about working from a licensed product, is that eventually you can run out of things to license. You know what I mean? Like, Star Wars X-Wing had that, where you're like, beginning, you were like, oh man, I got an X-Wing, oh, I got a TIE Fighter, oh, I got a TIE Interceptor, oh, cool, I got a Y-Wing and an A-Wing. And eventually you're like, there was this thing that was in the background for about 4 seconds in one of the TV shows. Let's make a ship out of that. I mean, like, you run out of ships to start doing. And so you're like, well, we've worked ourselves into a corner here. And, you know, admittedly, they keep making TV shows, so they keep making the potential for like Mandalorians and things like that and whatever in Legion, but they've gone through most of the models that are available. So eventually they're gonna get to a point where they're like, well, you know, whereas when you make your own IP, you can just keep making new stuff. Like, oh, guess what? We're bringing back the squats. Boom, there you go. An entire line of new models, new army. Awesome, it's great. Or whatever. But when you go with licensing, then you either have to just decide to go off the trail and decide to start making your own new Star Wars stuff. But that's not easy to do, mostly because Disney won't let you. But yeah, so I don't know that they're going to start to sunset it necessarily, but they may be planning ahead to seeing that it's going to slow down. So they're basically just going to start making the same junk over and over again, but then changing the rules. I mean, long term, that's what you have to do when you work with licensed stuff like that, I think. Along the lines of Space Station 0, I'm finishing a bunker and a sci-fi tank of danger for my terrain. Nice. Maybe you can play Shatterpoint, but use your existing Legion minis. I mean, there's probably, someone earlier mentioned the concept of just taking inches and turning them into centimeters, and that'll probably do the job. I can see that, sure. Shatterpoint and MCP both have terrain in the core box. It's actually a good idea, as you technically have enough to play the game. Yeah, like you got like a little convenience store, maybe some dumpsters and some stuff like that in the MCP box, if I remember correctly. Are there 2 buildings, or is there just 1? I can't remember, but yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. There was also a train in the Boba Fett show. That's a good point. Menards carries O-scale train stuff. See, is that because I know Menards carries train stuff for some reason, but O-scale I thought was the stuff that they carry at Menards is generally okay looking with 28mm stuff. So I wonder if it has N scale. I don't know. I can't keep track of those. Do you have any opinions on printable papercraft terrain? I've never used it. I've used the Tinker Turf stuff, which is like cardboard that's already pre-printed, and you just kind of punch out some bits and fold it and do some gluing. But actual like print your own papercraft, and I've never used any of that. I'm a big fan of natural terrain such as rocks, hills, and alien trees. It sort of scales itself. It certainly can. That is the definite benefit. You do get to a point with certain types of trees where you're like you could, if you've gotten a bunch of pine trees that will work very well with, let's say Flames of War, which is closer to 15mm scale. And then you're like, well, now I'm going to use these in Marvel, Crisis Protocol at 40mm. They're going to look like saplings, which is fine. You'd be like, well, here we are having a fight in the tree nursery, getting ready for Christmas. And that's fine. But in general, yeah, rocks and stuff like that, you can definitely scale. Wasn't Star Wars Shatterpoint a Legends novel with Mace Windu? Yes, it did seem to. If you do a Google search for Star Wars Shatterpoint, and then you click on images, you will definitely see the cover of that novel. Oh, hey, look. Hide user. There we go. Go away. Some weird porno site hopping in there. I still play Silent Death, and it's from the 90s. Oh yeah, good old Silent Death. That was yeah, I used to me and a couple of friends, we used to do demos of that at like Gen Con, and then even the first time I ever went to Origins in like 1995. Well, that's not true. Technically, there was an Origins in 92 that was in Milwaukee at the same time as Gen Con. They were basically in the same building. Origins used to travel, and then sometimes shortly after that, they decided we're sticking in Columbus, and they've been in Columbus ever since. 95, we went to my friend Peter and my friend Sarge. We went to Origins in Columbus, and we ran demos of Silent Death with a bigger gaming club from Canada called the Ottawa Red Shirts. Battlefield 1 was a really fun game. I wish they had just leaned into making it alt history. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, they kind of did a little bit there. Hey, Discourse. Yeah, they did. I liked that game a lot. I didn't really get into the Battlefield 5 very much. But yeah, I think it would have been interesting. I'm waiting for them to make another like 2142. There was Battlefield 2142, which was sci-fi. It had like it sort of had mechs kind of, and it had a bunch of cool stuff going on. And I really wish I was really hoping they were going to make one of those. I was kind of hoping that this one 2042 was going to be that, but not quite. But I don't know. I like 2042 well enough. I haven't played it in a while, but they've added a bunch of quality of life increases and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So hopefully that will turn out well. And I do want to get start playing again a little bit, but I haven't really played that much. I think it will actually help Legion. It means they will already have the artwork done for characters and the approval for minis. The scale difference. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Feels like these games really need to push more into solo and co-op. Makes things like mission packs and scenarios way more plausible thrown terrain. I really don't feel like the majority of the industry, not the industry, majority of the customers in our gaming. I think that solo and co-op is still a pretty niche thing. If you can pull it off as a game designer, I think it's a smart move to put it in there, because there will be people who will look at this game going, I don't need another game that I don't have anybody to play with. But you look at it and go, oh, it's also got solo mode though? Well, and then you might be slightly more likely to buy it. Vince and I are focusing on it just because we feel it's underserved, and also, again, it's a niche thing and whatever, and that's cool. But I think that in the wider, like larger, more money-making portion of the industry, they're still focused very much on the versus mode in those situations. Like, I enjoy them, for sure. Like, I'm a big fan. But I know that there's a lot of things that I enjoy that nobody else likes. Like, I'll find a cool ice cream flavor that I think is really interesting and cool, and then it will be discontinued because I was one of the 5 people who ever ate it. And I'm like, there you go. Let's see here. I'd rather like the larger scale for both MCP and, in theory, Shatterpoint. I don't collect Legion, so it's not a problem for me. Yeah, I mean, there are folks out there that are definitely going to be interested because it's a bigger physical model. Some people like because they feel it's easier to paint, which is fine. Some people just like the look of it, and that's fine too. For me, then again, it's also, like I said, it's a terrain issue. Like, I've got a bunch of terrain for Legion, and it's true that a lot of it is 3D printed, and so you could technically just go back in and scale it up in your computer and then print it bigger, but then I got to print it twice. Well, I don't have a printer, so I'd have to have somebody else print it the second time. And so, yeah, I mean, I have the resin thing, but for terrain, you usually want to use the FDM one with the spool and the plastic and all that jazz. So, yeah, that's kind of a thing. N scale is more like 6mm. I got nothing. I don't know why they don't just use numbers. Why do we got to use letters? Weird. Let's see here. Menards carries a few different scales at the same buildings. I worked inventory there for a few years. No kidding. Well, A, that's pretty cool. I mean, B, I did not know that they carried multiple scales. That makes sense. Evidently, the guy who started Menards was super into trains, which is because Menards is a hardware store, but they also sell completely pre-built model railroad terrain, which is also an interesting thing. It's odd, but it's cool. There are whole big lists on Reddit of stuff people want: Army Troopers, Greedo, Zuckuss, Forlom, Gungans, Naboo. I used to hate the Clone War animation, so it took me a while to get into it. Love Legion. I'm pretty sure I'm going to love Shatterpoint. Different look. They look good. Well, that's cool. I remember watching the original Clone Wars when they were 2D hand-drawn stuff or whatever. And then I watched a little bit of the 3D animated stuff, and then I sort of fell off. To me, it seemed like every episode of the computer one, the more 3D animated one, General Grievous would be doing something spicy, and then along they would show up to stop him, and then he would get into his General Grievous mobile and take off. And that was literally every episode for a while. It was just he's doing something, we showed up, he left. Okay, and just I don't know. But that was, again, my personal opinion. Let's see here. There's true O scale, and there's traditional O gauge Lionel trains, which aren't quite scale. That's a lot of different scales. BF1 should have fully embraced steampunk, and BF 2142 is one of the best. Yeah, I like that one a lot too. I've also kind of liked the Vietnam one. I don't know that I would play any of those these days as much. But I would like, because Battlefield 2042 is, well, it's technically sort of like near future and it's not real. And 2142 would be also a lot of fun, but I'm not like, I'm done playing World War II games. I'm done. I just don't want to play any more World War II, specifically, video games. Now, again, if it was something like Conflict 47, where it was like alternate history World War II, okay, cool. Now you got me kind of back on board. Like, there's a PC game right now called Marauders that I'm interested in, which is what people refer to generally as diesel punk. And it is, it's basically, it's as if World War II never ended and it's just been going on, but it's like 1992 now. And you're out in space, but all the spaceships kind of look like submarines. People are still walking around with like MP40s, but they're in space, so that's the kind of the diesel punk thing where it's like we took World War II and just kept going with it. And that I think is interesting. That's sort of fun. But I read that scale refers to the measurement from the base of the model to the model's eyes. Yes, I believe from the bottom of their feet to their eyes is supposed to be what scale is going to be. Whoever created that scale obviously never anticipated how bases and poses would change. That's true. I mean, I'm assuming generally, and I don't know this for sure, but I would assume in many situations for 3D sculpting, you sculpt the model like standing in a T pose, and that's where you maybe get your scale measurement from, and then you put them into a crazy pose doing whatever it is they're doing this a lot. I don't know why. I would think that maybe if you're, I don't know, you'd have a gun unless maybe you were like Scarlet Witch or something like that, and then you'd be doing like that. I don't know. This is why I don't 3D sculpt, I guess, very much. Half the time I think the games need to sell the idea of playing them. Oh yeah, no, you definitely, like, I will buy a role-playing game knowing full well I will never play it. But it's very cool looking, the layout, the book, the artwork is very cool, the story is very interesting. I'm going to read it. With miniature games, I'm generally looking at even if it's just a miniatures agnostic, rulebook only kind of situation, I look at it and I go, will I ever play this? Every once in a while, I'll buy a book where I'm like, I'm never going to play this, but I want to read it and it looks cool or whatever. But for the most part, I definitely need to be kind of convinced if I'm going to buy something that I'm probably going to play it or maybe going to play it. And if there's the possibility of being able to play it solo, then that is another tick in the direction of me probably buying it. But again, your mileage may vary. Why is FDM better for terrain? Generally larger build plate, like with resin's more expensive than FDM. Like if you were going to build a resin building that was very large, it would be a lot more expensive. Plus your build plate in most resin printers is smaller anyway, depending. They're getting bigger, certainly. But like you can buy a FDM printer for $200 that'll print big stuff, whereas it's a little bit harder with resin, I think. That's at least my opinion. I could be wrong. Star Wars Shatterpoint is a pass for me. I already play Legion, and I'm not willing to scale up. Yeah, no, I can understand that. That's the thing, too. Again, like, if you're already playing Legion, it's not like you can just go and grab your terrain from Legion and put it in there, because then these people will all look like giants in comparison, So, yeah. The owner of Menards is obsessed with the inventory of the terrain stuff. It was weird. Huh, that's neat. For those of you who don't know, Menards is a kind of a chain. It's kind of like a Lowe's or like a Home Depot, but it's mainly just in the Midwest, I think. I don't know. The 3D animation in Clone Wars got better with each season. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I maybe only watched the first couple of seasons, but I didn't ever have a big problem with the animation particularly. It was definitely very stylized, and that was cool. I had no problem with that. It was more like the stories, and early on just didn't grab me. FTM tends to have a bigger build plate. Yeah, you can make larger objects for cheaper. Oh, that's kind of what I said. I was mostly right. Pretty sure the official name for Grievous's cycle bike is General Grievous Mobile. No, I'm not thinking of that one. He had a car. Like, he had a space car that looked kind of like a 57 Chevy, a little bit. Like it definitely was kind of swoopy, and it might have had fins, if I remember correctly. He would just get into that and be like, and take off. And I was like, oh yeah, that's how that one ended. I think Shatterpoint refers to the spot by my hobby desk that I keep dropping resin prints on. Oh, that's no good. You don't want that. Can't wait to play. Can't wait to play Star Wars Protocol. Yeah, yeah. I do rig my models when I sculpt them. Makes it easier to get poses. I don't know a ton about making figures that way. Like I know a little bit about 3D sculpting, like hard surface like stuff, but not like people or monsters or aliens or whatever. But I would assume that rigging that way would make more sense. I do know just the slightest a bit about like IK and like, you know, skeleton rigging and stuff like that, but not, I've never really done it. I've just watched videos about it. I need to go to Menards now. There you go. Yeah. Hot take, Clone Wars was a way to fix, or at least explain, the story problems of the prequels. I mean, that's the thing, is when you are making shows in between movies, right? Like if you look at Mandalorian, if you look at Andor, there's little areas that you can be like, well, in this movie this happened, in this movie this happened. We can maybe explain a bit about why that happened. The downside is, like, spoiler alert, Cassian, whatever his name is, Andor there on that show, he's not going to croak. He's never, like, that's the thing. There's never a time where I'm like, geez, is this guy going to make it? Like, I understand he's the main character, but still, there are plenty of shows that have killed off the main character before. But you know that this guy's going to be fine because he was in the movie that came after this, you know? So, yeah, that's what happens when you work within a pre-existing overall big, giant, you know, story, I guess. Grievous's fighter was distinctly Art Deco 50s swoop. Yeah, absolutely. If you like alternate history World War II, you'd probably like the Maschinenkrieger model kit line. I've not heard of that. Grievous's car / starfighter is called the Soulless One. Well, that's a terrible name for your vehicle. It seems, I don't know. Soulless One is badass for a ship. I mean, sure, it's metal, but it's, I don't know. You want to think that your ship is maybe got, I mean, you know, that very frequently, like, boats and stuff like that are referred to as she and stuff like that and whatever. People will talk about, like, the, you know, I don't know. It just seems odd. And technically, Grievous he's partially organic. Like, he's not just a robot. He's like, there's like goo inside there. I looked it up one time. He was like something and then blah, 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 and then kind of got made into a cyborg. And the reason in the show, and even in the movies, the reason he's got that cough, they actually explained that in, and I don't know if this was planned. I don't know if they just made him cough because they thought it was cool in like episode 2 or 3 or whenever he was in 2, I think. Because then in the hand animated Clone Wars, before the 3D animated stuff, there was an episode where he and Mace Windu were fighting, which was super cool. This is back when those animated Clone Wars episodes were 5 minutes long, and they would play them like in between shows on Cartoon Network. And yeah, there was this big fight between him and Mace Windu, and as he was again running away and leaving, Mace Windu like force crushed his like metal torso, which squished on the organic bits that were still inside, and that's what evidently gave him the cough that he's had ever since or whatever. So that was technically Mace Windu's job. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But like, I don't know if they planned that or if like the people doing that cartoon were just like, why does he cough all the time? Why does he have that cough? Let's give him a reason for it. I don't know. That stuff's cool sometimes. I like that. Just made me think of the deaths of the 80s Transformers movie. Oh, yeah. Good point. Why do bad guys in Star Wars always advertise that they're evil? Very self-aware. Yeah. I gotta be honest. Especially watching Andor, it is a situation where, like, you'll see someone, like, out on the street, you know, and they're wearing, like, a stormtrooper, like, t-shirt, or they've got, like, the Imperial symbol, like, you know, on a vinyl transfer thing stuck on their car or whatever. And I'm like, you know, those are the bad guys, right? Like the really bad guys. Like, and you just, as you watch Andor, you just see how bad, like, it's not like they're misunderstood. They're definitely the baddies. And I've never quite understood why you're like, yeah, I really like the baddies in that show. I don't get it. It's just, I don't know. Anyway. If I had the space, I'd build a model railroad layout, all war-torn and devastated, to double for a games table. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, like something like post-apocalyptic. That'd be pretty cool. Because you could then take a bunch of like the normal buildings that you get at the model railroad show or shop, and then like weather them and beat them up and stuff like that. It could be almost like a Fallout thing. That'd be pretty cool. As a person who plays Legion and Crisis Protocol, this is the game I wanted for years. Well, good. See, I mean, that's the thing. I'm dubious about it a little bit, but obviously there will also be people who are like, I am totally on board because I like this, and now this is just those two things put together, and that's great. I mean, maybe it'll sell super really well. For me, though, the scale thing is, I don't know. But I would love, again, to do a demo of it. We'll see. Hopefully I can maybe get a demo of it at Gen Con this year, or maybe even Adepticon if they do want to try to run it there. Do you think the recent AMG production faults with Legion, missing tokens, missing pieces, misprinted cards are related to split resources on 2 tabletop Star Wars games? I'm going to just straight up say it's probably the people who... It's just the problem that everybody's having right now. It's the problem with not having enough employees, not having enough, supply chain, not having enough shipping. Like there's a bunch of issues going on there. And that to me sounds like they're probably trying to run as fast as they can with fewer employees than they usually would. It's just a situation that your people are seeing worldwide, you know, like my local Burger King here just recently started staying open until 8 o'clock at night. For all summer they were only open until 4 in the afternoon because they didn't have any people to work there, because they admittedly weren't paying them much, and that's part of the thing, but that's the way it works. So has Adam picked up the weird pronunciation of robot from Vince? No, I picked it up from my friend Phil. I don't know if Vince and I have just been doing it independently, or if I've we've probably been doing it independently, but I picked up that from my friend Phil. Just looked outside, opened the garage door, still gloomy and crappy. There you go. You know, no, it was sunny before, but now it's not. That'll happen. I'm impressed by your ability to go this long without a break. That's only 2 hours. Mace Windex. Ooh. Grievous cough was planned, then retconned. That it always... Oh, really? Huh. Hello from Germany. Howdy, Simon. Shatterpoint should lean heavily into the Legends content. As I said above, creators like Mara Jade, Yuzan Vong, and so on. Yeah, I mean, I used to play the Star Wars miniatures game, which was not WizKids, but Wizards of the Coast. Yes, Wizards of the Coast. And it was pre-paint, random pack. You bought a sleeve, kind of like you do with HeroClix or whatever, and you open it up and you're like, oh, look, I got this and this and this and this. And I played that quite a bit. And you played it on just a regular mat, and it was like grid, stuff and whatever. But it was kind of the early days of me playing like some kind of miniatures and stuff. And it was also like, I wanted to play like different games, but at the comic shop at the time, we didn't have a game shop in town at that time. The comic shop who did sell the stuff, there was nobody there who was interested in terrain and painting and stuff like that, but they were interested in Star Wars and they didn't have to do anything to it, you know, and there was no terrain for the most part. So they were on board with that. So yeah, and in that game, again, the same situation. The first couple of sets, you're like, oh, this is the Rebels and whatever, you know, this is the stuff from episode 4. This is the Clone Wars set. And then eventually they're getting into like, this is the weird expanded universe set. Here's a bunch of crap that no one barely has ever heard of unless you like really read like all of the novels, all, you know, that kind of stuff. Because they were, again, running out of stuff to make, you know, because you have to keep making, every time they want to put out a new set, they're putting out 60 to 70 new models. Well, eventually you start scraping the bottom of the barrel. Grievous is a preface for the creation of Vader, the idea of a machine creature with a living entity still trapped in it. It's the expanded universe Vader struggles with. Oh, that's kind of cool. I can see that. Zoidberg from Futurama also says a robot like that. Yeah, I think that's possibly where it also comes from too, for sure. You might not get to this in time, but I was wondering if you had a direction to point someone who is having to teach themselves how to play 40K. I'm struggling to understand it. Me too, sadly. Yeah, I don't know that there is. I mean, honestly, there really should be a good video series from Games Workshop that says this is how you play the game. Not just some battle reports, but like, this is how you play the game. And I don't know that they've done that. Maybe they have. Unfortunately, they might have put it behind a paywall over on Warhammer Plus. I hope they don't. If anyone else in the chat's got an idea there for Catmaster, that'd be yeah. Especially since they changed every 3 years, and even within that every 3 years, all kinds of big major things get changed. Guerrilla Miniature Games on YouTube, you might want to try them. Yeah, it's a real tough thing with their big kind of tentpole games over there at Games Workshop, is that if you are just trying to get in from the ground level, trying to get in on playing, there's not a lot of great like resources to be like, here's how you start, like aim towards beginners. And I think that's a mistake. Well, folks, it's 11 o'clock over here in my neck of the woods, 11:01 technically. So I got to get ready to go. And I want to thank everybody for coming by and hanging out today. Again, this is my personal opinion about what I've seen so far about Shatterpoint. And I thought I'd bring it up, but you know, your mileage may vary. You might be like, this is exactly what I'm looking for, and I hope this is exactly what it's like, and that's cool. I'm glad for you. But if you know, you're like, well, this is cool, it's just a different thing I can use my miniatures for from Legion. I don't think that's actually the case. Those models don't look the same. So anyway, we'll see you again in 2 weeks here on the show. Otherwise, I'll be on Twitch tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central, working on, I think I'm still working on Chaos Cultists right now. And I'll, be hanging out there. So we'll see you folks again soon. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks for watching.